Welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast.
To me, being perfect is not about that scoreboard out there.
This is a chance of a lifetime.
When you can understand the person, you can then work towards a common goal.
We are all on the same team.
Know your role and do it to the best of your ability.
Focus on the fundamentals. We've gone over time and time again.
Your defense has got to be better.
Leave no doubt tonight.
Great moments are born from great opportunity.
Hello and welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast, where we believe that there is no algorithm for leadership, and so we interview great sports coaches from around the world to try and find ideas to help all of us be better leaders. Our great coach on this episode is Andrej Lemanis. Andrej is a former professional basketball player and now coach. As a player, he won the Australian National Championship with the Southeast Melbourne Magic in 1992. He then transitioned into coaching, holding various assistant roles until he was appointed head coach of the New Zealand Breakers in 2005. That team would ultimately go on to win 3 consecutive championships, leading to Andrej being appointed the Australian men's coach in 2013. He would go on to take the Australian team from a world ranking of 11 all the way to number 3, the highest the nation has ever been ranked, and he's gone on to become the winningest national coach ever. He is presently the coach of Ultra Chiba in the Japan League. And just before we go to the interview, today's podcast is brought to you by the Macquarie University Business School's MBA program. Designed to empower, challenge and transform, the Macquarie MBA gives you the business skills and knowledge you need to succeed in an evolving global economy. The program bridges the gap between theory and real-world application, bringing together world-leading professors, executives and industry partners to teach you how business can be used for good. I have just started working with the team at Macquarie on some projects and can attest to the quality of the people and material. To find out more, search for Macquarie University Business School's MBA. And just before we go to the interview with Andrej, a note to let you know that this interview was recorded in August 2023.
You're listening to the Great Coaches Podcast.
Andrej Lemanis, good afternoon and welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast.
Yeah, Paul, thanks for having me on. Seeing the list of coaches you've had on this podcast, I guess I'm a little humbled to be included in such great company.
Andrej, if it's any consolation, every coach I interview says the same thing, but I appreciate you. I appreciate you carving out some time to chat to us. Could I just start with something simple? Where are you in the world and what have you been up to so far today?
Yeah, so I'm currently in Japan in a city called Chiba, which is about 45 minutes east or southeast of Tokyo. Just came back from practice this morning. I coach here. This is my 3rd season coaching in Japan with a team called Ultra Chiba. They're a team, this is their 3rd year of existence. I've been their first ever coach. The goal of the organisation is to reach the B1 competition, and Japan has 3 levels, B1, B2, B3, and when you enter a league as a new team, you have to start in B3. So this was a interesting project for me. Thankfully, we got through B3. Won that division to get qualified, got promoted up to B2 last season and had our opportunities, but unfortunately fell short in the semi-final series to qualify for B1. And so here we are again with the goal to get up to B1.
There's a bit of Ted Lasso in that story there. We might find that, you take on the same results as the Richmond FC team and you end up winning it in your 3rd season. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what the future holds.
We'll see.
Andrej, I wanted to just start by name dropping a couple of big names. You've worked for Brett Brown and you've also worked with Brian Goorjian, and there's Ian Stacker in your background as well. They're 3 big names. And I'm just wondering, from this perspective, watching these guys up close, what is it you think the great coaches do differently that sets them apart?
Yeah, it's a it's an interesting question. I'm obviously really fortunate to have been in interactions with those guys through my career. Like very, very, very fortunate to be able to observe them and learn from them. I think so let me tell a different story. And you'll find I do this a lot. I just, and you do this with the media. You whatever questions they ask, you don't have to answer the questions they ask. You just, give whatever answer you want to give.
Feel free.
Or tell the story you're trying to tell. So when I first got the head coaching job in New Zealand, my first NBL head coaching role, and I was, seeking advice for some different coaches and people I respected, and one of them was Gordy McLeod. And one of the things he said to me was, be who you are as a coach. Don't try to be somebody you're not. And at the time, I just shook my head and said, yes, yes, yes. But it came back to be relevant for me, I guess, later on in the piece when coaching New Zealand first year, we were struggling, we were bad, we lost 10 games in a row. Everybody's on me, and I was again searching for answers. And people are like, oh, Brian, you ever played for Brian? Brian Goodwin would do it like this. Brian Goodwin would do it like that. He wouldn't accept this. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. And I was, trying to be more like Brian. And I got to the end of the season, and in the play debrief, like some of the messaging that came out was that they thought I was a bit false, and they couldn't really figure out who I was, and they couldn't trust me, and because they felt I wasn't being me. And I think those names that you talk about, when I reflect on that, like Brian, Brett, and Ian, they're all actually quite different in their approaches, but they're very comfortable with who they are. They buy into it, they do it, they deliver it, and they're consistent with it. And I think it's that consistency and the authenticity of it that then enables the players to find a way and to build those relationships. Because for me, at the end of the day, coaching is about trust, and the consistency of the approach builds that trust and enables them to have influence to get results and to get players to buy in.
I want to ask you about those 3 championships you won at the Breakers, but I'd like to go on a bit of a journey to get there, because I think the journey, in a way, is part of the story and part of the magic, I think, that you eventually unlocked in yourself and your team. But could we start, Andre, with your father? So he came out to Australia in his teens. I've read that you said he had very little English. He then went on to become one of your first coaches. How is he visible today in your leadership style?
It's interesting as I reflect back, what sort of leadership values I take from my father. And, when you're young, you don't fully appreciate, I guess, the story and the journey that your parents have been on. And, my father he lived through the Second World War. And as you get older and you hear some of the stories about how as a family of 4, they need to ration 5 potatoes to get through a week. Like that's what they had to eat, and how were they going to manage that situation? Stories of getting out of, the war ends and they're stuck in Germany and about to be sent back to the USSR and, communism, and their story of escape to get out of that and find a way into the American section and end up in Australia. But this, at gunpoint at the border, where are your papers, like all those, sort of stories that you just can't fathom going through. Coming to Australia with very little English and poor education, just because of, again, during the war, all that was interrupted. And so had to find a job to start supporting himself and put himself through night school at the time. And, learnt English and got a trade and, or got a skill, and became a chemist, and ended up having a very good job and living a very good life, and being able to support and raise 2 kids, and we got everything that we ever wanted. But I guess the learning from that, as I reflect on it, was when he told the stories, he never complained. It wasn't like, I was hard done by. I was like, oh, this is just the way that it was, and this is what we did, and this is how we overcame it. And then, we got presented with the next problem, and here we go, and we found a way to overcome that. And it's sort of that notion of just getting on with the job, I think, that I've taken from him. I think it filters through now, and I don't even think about it sometimes, or I haven't thought about it until, you get asked questions like this. I'm very much, as a coach, stuck on the process, like, let's focus on today, sort of guy. What do we need to do today to get better? And, the goal, every team wants to win the championship and do all that sort of stuff. That's all great. But how do we get there? And today, what we need to do is work on our defensive transition, or we need to, work, get better at communicating, whatever it is. Like, we need to come closer as a team. Let's do something today that helps us ultimately attain our goal, but let's not get lost in the hole. Let's go ahead and, get focused on the process. So I think that kind of, when I reflect on it, maybe that comes from my dad's just willingness to just accept what is and move forwards. You're on the bottom of the ladder. Okay, that is what it is. We can't change that. Everyone wants your head. Okay, good. We can't change that. So why do I bother about it? Why get worried about it? I don't. Okay, let's find a way to get better today.
You say that you're very focused on the here and now, and yet, if I understand correctly, when you went to New Zealand, you sat down with the owners and the GM, and you actually put a 5-year vision together. You actually sat down and said, here's where we need to be. And it was that vision that propelled those three championships. I'd love to hear more. I've researched it. I can't find anything specifically about that vision. I'm not sure whether it's something you're happy to share or not, but I'd love to hear about what happened in that meeting and how it energized the group.
Yeah, so it was actually more than one meeting, and I got to say the owners, Paul and Liz Blackwell of the New Zealand Breakers, were some of the nicest people you could ever meet. And in every career, in every journey, there's certainly luck plays a lot bigger than what we give credit for. And I was just really, really fortunate that I was at New Zealand at the time when those two, Paul and Liz, owned the team. When I first signed on, there was actually 3 different owners that had the team, and Paul and Liz came on as sort of 4th owners. And as it played out, they ended up buying out the other 3 owners and took on the team themselves, and they were just unbelievable people. And I guess, just as an example of that, what they believed in was building programs and investing in people. And at this stage, we weren't going very well on the floor. And when they took full ownership, the first thing they did was they said, you're our guy. We trust in you. We believe in you. We want you to go on the journey with us. Here you go. Here's a new 3-year deal. And I hadn't achieved anything yet, but they wanted to give me the security of knowing that they backed me. And I was prepared to show it. When other owners would have fired me, they got behind me and invested in me, which was amazing. So they come from business background, and I was, in terms of planning and strategic plans and all that, and they were applying that in the basketball environment. And I'd sat in those sorts of things before, and I must admit, I was a bit like, oh, well, here we go again. But what was different about this one, it happened over a few days, and we had the whole board in and spoke about, well, what do we want to do? We want to, yes, win the championship, but for them, it was also, it wasn't about winning basketball games. It was about making a positive difference in the lives of the youth of New Zealand. That was they're good. They come from a Christian background, and they want to make a positive difference in the community, and that was really important to them. And they thought that one of the reason that we needed to win was because that got you traction in the media and got you the ability to give your messaging, like the messaging of healthy lifestyles and making good decisions as kids would carry more weight if the team was respected because we were winning. And so that was their motivation for doing it. But what I liked about this plan is it drove, it drove the behaviours to get to that point. And what it did was enabled us as an organisation to stay focused clearly on the process, which I spoke to before, of, what have we achieved today that's, that is going to keep us on this path to winning this championship and making a difference in the lives of the young kids. And I guess the some clean examples of that in the first year, again, we weren't achieving very, very much on court in terms of results. We weren't winning. But we would review the strategic plan every 3 months and say, all right, what have we ticked off? What have we actually done? And one of them was that we'd formed an academy program for the younger elite kids in New Zealand, because we believed, one of the things that we believed was that we wanted a New Zealand Breakers team filled mostly with New Zealand players, because they were good enough, they were skilled enough to make the team, not just because they were born in New Zealand. But that needed investment. We needed to start a program, resource it, give it coaching, and that we wouldn't see the payback from that or the rewards of that for 4 or 5 years before we started to see those kids progress into the program. And as it was, when we're in those championship years, you look at it, there's, Ty Abercrombie, Corey Webster, Alex Pledger, the list went on and on and on of kids who'd come through that Breakers development program when they're playing for the Breakers and winning championships, and you got other teams going, oh, how can you afford all those guys? It's like, well, we actually got them on really good contracts because they trust us and they want to be here, and we've invested in them from when they were young. I remember after the second year, one of the things that we had achieved was we didn't cut an import during the season, which meant that our recruiting processes were right. In the first year I was there, we were cutting imports, and there was all, the chaos that happens with that and trying to replace them, and the disruption that is on the team. And in year 2, we didn't cut an import, and that was in our strategic. Yes, good. It means we've improved our recruiting processes and our scouting processes. So that was a win. And so whilst the on-court results weren't there in the first couple of years, I think the strategic plan was able to keep us out of the white noise. We didn't have to listen to everybody else and what they were saying and all the people pulling at the program. Internally, we were able to stay focused to say, well, this is what we said we wanted to achieve. And yes, we've done this, we haven't done that. No, why haven't we? And is it still relevant? Do we need to change it? And so for me, what it did was give us that ability to focus on the day-to-day, which sounds strange. We had the long-term plan, the 5-year plan, but all right, what do we need to achieve today then? How do we go ahead and tick something else off the plan?
It was Brian Gorgian who tapped you on the shoulder when you were a player and said, Andre, perhaps coaching's for you. When you look at players today and people around you and staff, and you start to evaluate whether they might be a good head coach, what leadership abilities are you looking for in them?
It's the ability to connect with people is what it is. Like I said, I think earlier in the interview, is coaching is just about the ability to influence. You're not out there playing. You can't change that. And so all you can do is influence people. And how do you influence? And people do it different ways. I believe trust is a big one, building trust, that the player knows that you ultimately have their best interests at heart and you're not in it for yourself, that you're in it actually to help them. And if you can get to that point and build that trust with a player, then you're in a position where you really can influence. And so I guess when I'm watching players now, it's, it is that, how are they connecting with their teammates? And I've said it, I think, in multiple interviews, one of the best I've ever seen at that is CJ Bruton. Obviously, he's getting his chance now with the Adelaide 36ers. But when he was a player, his ability to just connect with the entire locker room, from someone who come from a very wealthy background and never had a struggle in his life, he could talk to them in a way that could, get them to buy in and see, what was best for the team. He could have a conversation with someone who grew up in a ghetto and had struggled and had to fight for everything his entire life, and could talk to them in a manner that enabled them to believe in the system and believe in him and what we were doing. And CJ Bruton, I think as a player, won 6 championships. He played with 4 league MVPs, yet he never won an MVP himself, because he understood that for him to get the championships, what he actually needed to do was get the best out of all the talent around him. And he sacrificed. He's like, I don't need a league MVP. I just want championships. But it's really good for us if he's the league MVP, and this is how I can make him be the MVP. Like, he was just magnificent at that, at understanding how teams and dynamics work and being able to build those relationships that he could influence. So he's one of the best. There's actually a kid, I call him a kid, he's 34, 35 now on my Japanese team. He's a veteran of the group, and just I noticed with him his ability, obviously the cultures are different, and that's been an interesting observation and learning for me. And but just his ability to influence and connect, and he does it differently to CJ. He's, again, just because the culture is different and how he does it, but the respect that he gets from everybody in the team. But part of it is because, again, he's willing to take the time to give. I've never seen a veteran player like him hang around after practice and work with the young guys. Like, we'll practice for 2+ hours. Everybody's tired. One of the things about the Japanese is they do put in the work for sure, 100%. And so it's expected, and particularly when you're young, that after practice you go and you do another hour on your own, and you're shooting and ball handling and all that. And he will, after a tough practice, not every practice, but once a week, he'll go and he'll work with one of the young guys and, talk to him about some things and give him a hand to shoot over and rebound the ball for him, and just amazing. But because he's given of that time, and he's showing the player that he's investing in him, then when he needs something from the player, he goes and talks to him about it. He's able to have that influence because the player knows he values him, and he's got that trust with him in that relationship. And so for me, that's what it is. It's seeing people. Obviously, they need a basketball IQ, but it's there's the other story, right? Around. Sorry, you asked one question. I go, this is how I am. There's the story. I think Marty Clark told me this one about basketball coaching. When you start up as a coach, you want drills. Give me drills. And then after a while, you start going, can you teach me something about the tactics? Like, what are some of the offensive structures, and then some of the defensive structures, and what are the different methods? And you start going down that path, and then you start to getting a little bit competent with that. And then your third stage is, how do I handle the players? What do I do with this guy? He's all grumpy and cranky. What do I do? How do I get him to play together and believe in each other? And in essence, it needs to be flipped the other way around. Like, the most important thing is, how do you influence the players? How do you build that relationship? Then the X's and O's, the offense and defensive structures, they'll flow. That's actually pretty easy. And then the drills flow out of that. But if you don't have the relationship with the players and you can't influence, it doesn't matter how good you are at X's and O's, it's not going to happen for you.
Andre, I heard you say recently that you feel that you have a lot more control as the head coach by giving up control. And I'm really intrigued. Where did this come from?
Yeah, really, that's another really long story.
I'm not going anywhere.
So, again, in New Zealand, first few seasons, we weren't going so well. I've already told the story about, people telling me I need to be more like Brian Goorjian, and Brian's he's a strong coach. Like, he's a strong personality, can command a room, he can go at people. And I was doing some of that. I was getting hard. I was trying to stay on top of everything and not let anything slip. And because, some of the feedback is, you're letting too much slip. And I was like, and I'm on everything. And I'm grumpy all the time. again, at the end of the season, I got some of that feedback that it feel like you're kind of not real. You're being a bit false about who you are. And I was like, yeah, you're right. That didn't feel right. It didn't feel comfortable. Like people, players know, people are people. People read body language, all that sort of stuff, so they know. And then we started again searching for answers, and we got different motivational speakers in and all that sort of stuff, and some of this whole above the line, below the line thinking and all, and none of it actually sat very well with me because it was random people coming in, didn't know anything about our team or our organisation, and were telling us how we needed to run our business or our team, and this is how we needed to act. And I was like, well, why? Why is that applicable here? It doesn't make any sense to me. And then we ended up getting onto the group, and I know they've been in the media a lot and everybody knows a lot about them now, but leading teams. And I remember the first session with leading teams, we all got in the room and it was like, here we go again. He's someone else who's going to tell us about how we need to run our team. And the facilitator stood up and said, before we get going, he introduced himself. Before we get going, are there any questions? And Phil Jones, one of our veterans on our team, a guy I love, he was someone who's happy to sort of have a bit of a go and push the boundaries. He said, you got leading teams on your shirt. What is this about? Like, why are we here? Are we picking a captain? What are we doing? And the facilitator said, thank you, Phil. That's a very good question. How many games have you played in the NBL? And Phil's like, whatever, 200. And we go, all right, next player, how many games have you played? And we had Tony Ronalds on our team at that point, and he's played the most ever games in the NBL. I think at that stage it was maybe 580. And so he goes around, he tells his others, all right, so there's over 2,000 games of experience in this room, and you want me to tell you how to run your team. No wonder you guys are struggling. And for me, that was the aha moment that he's different. Like this isn't about him telling us how to run the team. This is about the team figuring out how to run itself. And so that started us, I guess, down that path of, down that path, and the team down the path of player, you can call it empowerment, but I call it more engagement and the ability to have input. And then when players, again, when they have input and they've had a say in how we're going to run and manufacture things, then they're much more accountable to it. And they can't hide behind, again, the first year, it's like, well, we had a bad year, and players are like, well, this is what you wanted to do. You told us to do all this stuff. It didn't work. This is all on you, coach. Whereas as we started to go down this line, I felt that it was certainly more the ownership was sat amongst across the entire team, because the players had some input. And, and when you break it down to a more micro level, we're talking about a scouting situation, and the player's like, but what if I chase over instead of under? What do you think of that? It's like, you want to do that? And he's like, yeah, I think that'd be smart. Good, do that. And then in the game, sure as hell, when he does it, he makes sure that it works, right? Because he suggested it. And so he's more committed and determined to making that action work, because he was like the one who said, I think this is a good idea. And so as that permeates out, and you give players the ability to have input, have influence, take ownership. Assistant coaches, the same thing. Give them more authority, give them more responsibility. What I found was, like, when you're sitting back after that first, I guess I had the sort of light bulb moment after you win the first championship, and everybody's sitting around and sharing stories and having a drink at a barbecue, and you start to find out about some of the things that happened off court that never got to my level, because one of the senior players or an assistant coach or the team manager had stomped it on its head before it got out of control, or elevated to a point where now the head coach had to get involved and deal with it. And that's when I started to say, okay, there's something about this here where I've given up, it felt like I gave up a lot of control, because to sometimes I didn't know everything that was going on in the organisation, but I actually felt that gave me more control because I didn't have to do everything. Like, everybody was pulling us in the right direction. And so that's, I guess, what I meant by that comment. And, it's interesting. There's again, in my time in New Zealand, like we had coaches come and visit with us, and I always open the door, and anytime anyone wants to come and visit, if anyone's come and happen to be swinging by Chiba, Japan, they want to come to some practice sessions, they're always welcome to come in. But had a young coach come and spend a week with us in New Zealand. He just got a head coaching role in New Zealand NBL, and this was right in the peak of that time when we were going down this path of player engagement. And he watched it all and watched me asking questions of players and involving them in the process, and writing a bunch of notes. And then he went away for his season and didn't have a great season, and came back the next year. And I said to him, how'd you go the first year? And, did you implement any of the things that you did here or learnt here? And he said, it's interesting. He said, I went down that whole path and I tried to engage with the players and I asked them questions. And after the first couple of months, I kind of had to drift away from it or go away from it because the players thought I didn't know what I was doing. And that's why I was always asking them what they thought. And, there's always the balance, right? And it's part of it's who knows what the actual formula is and what the actual equation is, but there is an art to getting it right.
Andre, what intrigues me about basketball is the coach is almost like the sixth player because you're very close to the action. You can call the plays. You can communicate directly with the players. Given your learnings that you've just talked about, this balance between questioning and directing, where do coaches get it wrong courtside?
Certainly in basketball, I can speak to that, is getting lost in referees, like getting distracted by things that don't make a difference, and that you can't control. And that's certainly when I reflect on my game, certainly in my early days, and still happens to me now, is there are times when you review the video and you're like, why? Because this is another thing, right? Is I had a good learning moment when I was sitting there and we're watching, doing the video session. I was like, getting on. We're not getting back in defensive transition here, and like we didn't rotate on this situation, and like we messed up this matchup. And one of the players said to me, he said, "Coach, this is all good, but why didn't you tell us at the time? Like, why are you telling us on the video?" And I was like, that's a great question. Like, what a wonderful question. I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm missing something, right? I'm not doing my job. My job is to help you guys. And as I reflected on that question, one of them was because I was too worried about the referees. I was, getting lost in trying to yell at them and engage with them and influence them. And that's not helpful. And so I got back to trying to do my job, which was actually be useful to the players. And so again, where do coaches get it wrong? I mean, I don't know. Like it's at the end of the day, I keep coming back is, are you able to influence positively? Can you make a difference? And whether that's with tactics, something that you see that can make a difference with your team, offensively, defensively. Players see it, they see us make a change, and good things happen, and that builds confidence and trust. The way you communicate with the players, can you give them confidence when they need confidence? Can you pick them up when they need to be picked up? Can you push the button at the right time when you need to push a button? And you can, again, if you built trust and a player truly believes that you have their best interests at heart, you can go at them when you need to go at them. But you need to know them to be able to do that stuff, to get the reaction that you're after, and to get the positive outcomes that you're after. So it's interesting because, again, how the two fit together, it's, I talk about to be a good coach, you need to be who you are. And if you're a yeller and screamer, can be a yell and screamer. That's not who I am. But if you yell and scream, I think you really need to be mindful of how you've built those relationships and that trust, so that you can, so the players can continue to have like confidence in themselves and in you and what we're doing as a team. I think coaches can get too negative on situations. They can get negative on the game. They can get negative on plays, negative on players. I think that happens, and I keep coming back to not being in the moment. And you can get distracted by a lot of things. And if the only thing you can control is what's happening on this possession, or my communication with this player right now, that's all I can control. And so staying clear enough of mind so you can stay in the moment.
Andrej, when it comes to learning, you've written and spoken about the importance of creating the right context for people to adapt to. I've seen you give seminars on it. Seems to be something that is very, very close to your center of your philosophy. How does this idea shape the training environments you create?
Yeah, so when I was the head coach of the national team, in my first appointment, I was the full-time head coach, and that led me to Canberra and to the AIS, and there's a whole myriad of resources there that I didn't know existed previously, and I was intrigued by lots of things. I've always kind of been, as I've got into coaching, intrigued by how the mind works and how people learn and all those sorts of things. And there's a guy there, and if you heard any of my discussions on this, I always give him credit, is Adam Gorman, who's a skill acquisition expert or professor. I'm not even sure what level he is, like very good. And so Gormo is actually, he likes basketball. And so when I sought him out, he was thrilled, and we spoke a lot, and I got intrigued by, I didn't know they existed, like these skill acquisition experts. And it makes sense. Like, how do people acquire skill? Like, why haven't we gone down this path before? Like, that's what the whole game is about, right? Is acquiring skill. And so, again, I could sit here we could have a 3-hour discussion on this, but I guess, some of the simple things is, so we're sitting there, we're talking about basketball, and we're sitting there at the end of a practice session, and he's like watching someone shoot 10 shots from the corner with somebody passing it to him. And he said to me, "How often does that happen in the game?" I was like, "What?" He's like, "Where you stand in the corner with no one guarding you and you get 10 shots in a row." I was like, "Yeah." Like, of course, never. He's like, "So why do you practice it?" So, I don't know. I guess because we always have. It was a good question. It was like, why do we practice that way? And so I guess the essence of that, as I spent more time with him, was that in order for practice to be useful, it needs to develop a skill that transfers into the game, because that's where, you're trying to be, where you need to perform. And one of the other things he always spoke to is, to be skillful, you need to be truly adaptive. And, for me, he used to use the example of, Roger Federer can win on grass, he can win on clay, he can win on hard court, and he can win against a left-hander, right-hander, big service spin, a slicer, heavy slicer. He can beat them all. Like, he can adapt his game to the situation. And so Gormo's thing was all about, to acquire skill, you need to practice again in situations that are relevant to the game. And so rather than practicing 10 shots in a row on nobody, let's start to come up with some drills that are more game specific and game like, and actually now developing the skill sets you're going to need in a game. In a game, when you got the ball, like someone's running at you, you got to make decisions. Am I open? Is somebody else open? How long do I have to shoot this? And there's a whole bunch of research that he did behind it with some of his team. And, he charted a bunch of shots from the Olympics across all the teams, and how many times are you an open shot, contested shot, heavily contested shot. how many times was a player able just to shoot in rhythm, or he had to change his shot and shoot out of rhythm and change the flight of the ball a little bit. And the statistics are remarkable. Like, it backs up everything in terms of all the shots at the Olympics. Like 80% of them were contested. And it's like, so why aren't we practicing contested shots? Of all the shots at the Olympics, something like 78% of them showed some sort of deviation or adaptation on the shot. It's not just standing there in rhythm. And so how do we practice that, and why don't we practice that? And that's, I guess the essence of the basis of what I try to do now, is keep devising ways and drills to make the skill learning relevant to the game and able to transfer across into the game. And it takes some thought, and one of the things, so I guess one of the examples Gormo gave me that I always remember is the Australian Olympic swimming team. There was a gold medal swimmer, and for whatever reason, her dive in the water had started to deteriorate. It wasn't where it needed to be, and coaches were, you need to engage this and hold your core and, and take engage your glutes and then push from here. And that still nothing was happening. And eventually they got Gormo down and told him what they wanted, and, a bit more arcing in, and he's thought about it. And then he got a pool noodle and he put that out and he said, just dive over this. And so she dove over that, and he looked across at the coaches. He said, is that it? Yeah, that's pretty close. A lot of times the athletes have the answer, right? We don't need to overcomplicate it. What we need to do is create the environment for them to get to the learning and to get to the skill that we're trying to teach. And, and so in basketball terms, some of the things that we'll do now, like if we want to encourage more kick aheads in transition, like at practice, we'll give a +1 every time the ball is thrown over the center line instead of dribbled over the center line. Like you need to be creative and just find little ways to encourage the learning that you want. But yeah, we don't do much on zero shooting. Like, it's still relevant. Players do it because they like it and they feel good about it, and it gives them they see the ball go through the net and give them a certain sense of confidence. But we will do a lot more contested shooting and 2-on-2 on 1-on-1 and things that are more relevant to a game situation.
Andre, you're presently the winningest Australian men's national team coach ever. Let's add the 3 national championships with the Breakers and the conference title in Japan. I guess this means you know a thing or two about winning. But I wanted to just flip that around. Can a focus on winning ever be detrimental? Can it ever be too great that it dislodges the team?
The answer is yes. And I think I've lived some of that experience here, actually, in Japan. Like I said, the team, the entire team was set up to get into B1. We all know we've got a good budget. I'm not hiding behind that. We've got a good budget and we're expected to win. And that permeates throughout the organisation. And I felt that last season where we hit some adversity and we had a time when we lost 4 games in a row. But I think losing the 4 games in a row was a result of losing 2 games in a row. And the tension that built within the group, the stress that built within the group, because we're so focused on we have to win the B2 championship, we have to win it, we have to win to go to B1, that it meant that we now played with a tension and a stress which wasn't helpful. In fact, it was detrimental to results. And it took me a while to come to that realization myself and to try to put the fun back in to the basketball. And, you know, as much as I sit here and talk about not being distracted by the white noise, being clear of mind and being in the moment and focusing on what you can control now, what we can control today, what do we need to get better at today, process driven. Like, this is all very good in theory, more difficult in practice. You know, I've been a head coach for over 20 years and I got distracted. Like, you know, I got caught up in the whole, bloody hell, we've lost 2 in a row, there's 3 in a row. getting a bit more anxious. I'll get more anxious at practice and feeling the stress and all those sorts of things. And it wasn't until I think I took that step back and kind of caught myself and said, hang on, you're losing who you are as a coach here, and you need to lead us through this, Lemanis, is to show the team that we're okay. This is fine. This is just a bump in the road, and this is how we get out of it. We get back to the day-to-day, and we'll practice like this, and we'll focus on these few things. But today, all we need to do is get better at this, and then we'll be fine. Tomorrow, we'll get better at something else, and that'll lead into the game. And it's good enough or it's not. But we need to get back to worrying about those things that we can control. So, can a focus on winning be detrimental? Yes, it can be, I think. And the other thing is, if this is where I go back to the plan in New Zealand. Everybody wants to win. Like, why no one's in the competition to lose. Like, if you're in the competition, like, you're there to win it. Otherwise, why are you playing? So that's always a given, right? And every team wants to win. We all want to win the championship. But how do you do it? Like, what's important to your team? Like, and if you don't know the road to get there, or what you believe the road is to get there, then even if you stumble on success, you don't know how to keep it. Like, and if things are going wrong, you don't know what to fix. Like, it's sort of just, if you don't know where you're going, every road will get you there. So it's, I think it's very, it can be a dangerous thing if all you focus on is winning and you don't put in the building blocks underneath and the map that you believe you need to follow to get to the winning.
I'm just curious. You're in Japan. I'm not sure what the level of English is like. So I imagine you're having to sharpen your communication skills in this environment because you're under pressure and you're trying to get very nuanced communication through to the team. How have you adapted to that challenge?
It's been cool. It's been part of the learning experience. And one of the reasons I came here was I wanted to try something new and something different and a different challenge. And as I say, I found this, this journey that I've been on with player engagement and building trust that way. And it's turned out to be relatively, successful and impactful, and has brought a lot of reward for me as well, because, I get my joy out of seeing the players improve and grow and find that they can achieve some of the things that they're looking to achieve. But I think I've grown a little stale in the NBL in Australia. It's like, I've been in there a long time, and this opportunity came in Japan. It was like, this is very different, and we'll go have a life experience, but test my coaching, sort of my coaching style, and see if that can be impactful or effective in a country where English is not the first language. And it's been difficult, like it really has. So much of, as you say there, so much of language is nuanced, and the word you choose to say, and the tone that you say it in, and the expression that's on your face as you say it. And to add to all of that is not only the language barrier, but Japan, with the COVID, stayed with the face mask for a very, very long time. Actually, all last season, as when I was coaching, I had to coach in face masks, and so that takes some of the facial expression away from it as well, of course. And it has taken a lot longer and a lot more time to build those relationships with the players, and throwing that the cultural difference as well, as trying to understand who they are as a culture, what values they hold, and how do you, within that value system, find a way to connect with them. I can't force them to connect with me in a manner in which I'm used to in Australia. I need to, it's their country, it's their way of life, and I need to find a way to fit into their style, so I can have some influence. And without speaking the language, that's very, very difficult. And so again, it's consistency of messaging, of trust. The players who've been with me for a few years now, or two, they're going into our third season, you can see them now more and more trust me and come up and ask some questions and have influence. And I know, particularly with again the culture here in the basketball environment is very much coach is king. Coach tells us what to do. We listen. And I've come in with a much different approach in terms of I want to go with the whole group and engage you all and have you part of the process. And again, at the start, that didn't bite at all. There was no traction on that, and they looked confused. But now, I had maybe the back end of my first year where one of the senior players came up and said, "Coach, I think on the defense we should maybe do it like this." And I was like, "Thank you." Yes, here we go. Now we're getting somewhere. We're having a discussion, and you feel confident enough to come up and talk to me about this. And because you're playing, you need to execute this, and you have an opinion. So thank you for sharing it. And if you are going down this sort of path, it's very important that when the player, when you first get this sort of the player willing to open up and make himself vulnerable, that you, even if you don't agree with him, make him feel 100% thrilled that he came up to you with the question and wanted a discussion. That's a real key moment, and I thought that was a key moment, and we've sort of built since then. And I'm just so fortunate again that I spoke before. So much of this is luck. Is I have an assistant coach here. I didn't appoint him. He's a Japanese he's a Japanese coach who speaks English, and so he can communicate in both languages. And he's just been phenomenal. And obviously, as we've grown, his ability to understand sort of the way that I'm going, and I guess fortunately we have a similar belief system in how to coach a team, and so he's been phenomenal in that, in helping me sort of grow this environment here. And of course, we do have 3 Americans or 3 imports here. All ours happen to be American. They don't speak Japanese, and so the whole mix of how the Japanese players interact with the English-speaking players, that's been it's been good. It's been fun to learn from, and I think it's really continued my growth in education as a coach, and that's what it's about. I think that's what it is. You got to stay on the journey. You got to keep growing and finding different ways to get better yourself.
Well, one last question then, if I can, Andre. And you're on the journey, using your words, New Zealand, Australia, now Japan. And I guess what I wanted to ask you just in conclusion was, in the distant future, when you do hang up the whistle, put away the clipboard, if you still use clipboards these days, what's the legacy that you hope you've left behind as a coach?
I just hope that the players and people in the programs that I've been with say that I made a positive difference. I helped them in some way. It's for me, there's nothing more rewarding than that. And I've been fortunate to have a few nice moments of that already in my career, with a couple of different players who have said that I wouldn't have made the NBA without your help. My experience with the national team and the fact that you took me on that journey is one of the things that I always remember for the rest of my life. So those sorts of that sort of feedback for me is absolutely gold, and I hope that as I grow old and those players come through and the people, members of staff that I've worked with along the way, when they reflect, say, yeah, he made a difference. He made a good environment, and I learned something from him that made my life a little bit more positive.
That's a pretty good way to finish. So I'm going to thank you for your time. Andre, I know it's hot where you are today. Maybe you can go and have a nice cold Asahi if that's allowed. And look forward to sharing this interview with the rest of the world and following on as you chase down that title this year. Hi everyone, you have been listening to the great coach, Andrej Lemanis. I hope you got a lot out of Andre's long and winding career and found a few ideas that you can bring back to your own dinner table, locker room or work table for discussion. When I listened back, some of the other key highlights for me were the story he tells about the team consultant they brought in to work on their interactions and how this led to the team taking greater ownership of their culture. How the drive to make a positive difference in the lives of the youth of New Zealand was the impetus behind the 3 championships the Breakers won, and how the consistency and authenticity of great coaches allows them to build trust, and this in turn allows them to have the influence they need to get results. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And just before we go, if you have any feedback, then please let us know. Just like Matt Embling, who, after listening to our episode with Sir Graham Henry, said, "Great interview, Paul. The way the discussion around depression was tastefully done on what can be an extremely tricky topic." Thanks, Matt. We love the interaction with the people around the world who listen. And so if you have any feedback or comments, please let us know. And of course, if they're positive ones, well, then let a friend or two know as well. All the details on how to connect with us are in the show notes or on our website, thegreatcoachespodcast.com.